friends. I'm Carrie Jo, and this is Holy Chuckles Podcast, a space where all meets honesty and where God's gentle humor shows up in the people he chooses. So pull up a seat, take a breath, and let's look together for the sacred in the everyday and the quiet laughter of a God who delights in working through our imperfect stories. Welcome back. As we continue through 1 Samuel chapter 2, we're looking at two verses that speak directly to our self-worth and our relationship with God, not in a heavy way, but in a clarifying way, helping us to see which inner patterns are truly ours and which ones we've simply learned to listen to. Chapter 2, verse 12 and 13. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a three-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled. Literal of verse 12. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. His sons were priests by office, but they were called scoundrels. They did not respect God, nor did they respect the sacred work that they were supposed to be doing. They held positions of spiritual authority, but they had no integrity, no reverence, and no inner alignment with what they represented. They were people in sacred roles, but they were unaligned with sacred reality. The symbolic, let's go through the figures of this story again. Hannah, our inner soul. Elkanah, divine essence, divine order. Samuel, the gift, the inner knowing, the awakened spiritual healing. Eli, old systems you no longer rely on. God, the ground of being. And now we're going to go ahead and add two new figures, which are the priest Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas. The sons symbolize broken beliefs that come from that old system. Eli's sons represent inner patterns that don't respect your worth, don't honor your inner soul, don't value what is sacred inside you, operate automatically without intention or connection. They act like they have authority, but they are not aligned with your true self. They hijack your peace, clarity, and well-being. These are not quote-unquote demons or external forces. They are internalized patterns. So they're self-criticism, old coping mechanisms, shame-based beliefs, fear-driven reactions, inner narratives that tell you you're not enough. The voices that do not honor your truth. These are the parts of you that damage your self-worth, and they're not the real you. They are scoundrels pretending to run your inner life. This scripture gives them a name, patterns that have no regard for the sacred within you. How this resonates in my life? Not every voice inside me is my true voice. Some old thoughts I used to carry. They didn't honor my worth. They didn't respect my soul. They didn't align with who I really am. And they didn't reflect God's true view of me. Those voices were the symbolic sons of Eli. I had some patterns inside me that acted with authority that they never earned. For example, the inner critic that spoke like it knew me. The fear that told me how life would go. The self-doubt that claimed to predict my failure. The old beliefs that felt true only because they were repeated. They were a repeating cycle throughout my life. Those parts operated like Eli's sons, loud, automatic, unwise, unaligned. I began to see which patterns honored my soul and which patterns did not. This was the beginning of my self-awareness, self-worth, healing, boundaries, inner clarity, spiritual awakening. I began to ask myself, does this thought honor me? Does this belief respect the sacredness of who I am? Does this pattern align with my true self? If not, it's a son of Eli, a pattern with no regard for the soul or for God. My journey with God became a journey with my true self. This verse helped me understand God is not the voice that belittles me. God is not the force that shames me. God is not the pattern that pressures me. God does not speak like a scoundrel. As my relationship with God deepened, my relationship with myself deepened as well. I discovered the voice that never honored my worth never came from God. And those voices were never truly me. Verse 13. Now it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled. Literal. During a sacrifice, the meat was boiling as part of a ritual. A servant of the priest would come with a 3-pronged fork. This was not part of God's instruction. God's instructions, because I had to go look this up. I wanted to know what the instructions were when the sacrifice happened, what the priest received, what they should be doing. So what Eli's sons did was not part of the instruction from God. God's instructions were the fat belonged to God first. The fat was burned as a sacred act of worship. Now listen, we all know I'm a fat kid. And what's the best part of the meat? The fat. And of course, who do you give the best part to? Who do you give the best parts of yourself to? Who do you give the best parts of everything to? God. And then you give it to yourself. So the fat belonged to God first. Only after the fat was burned could the priests take their portion. The priests, they were given specific portions: the shoulder, the cheeks, the stomach. The priest did not interrupt the worshipers, which meant they didn't barge in. They didn't demand meat. They didn't take it by force. They waited until the worshipers followed every part of God's instructions. And then they came in to get their part, to get their portion of the meat. The sacrifice was a slow, sacred, orderly process. So it went like this. The animal is offered. The fat is burned on the altar. The meat is boiled or roasted. The priests receive the parts assigned by God. The worshiper takes the rest to share with their household. Everything was reverent, intentional, slow, and honoring. What Eli's sons did showed an unauthorized intrusion into a sacred moment of worship. The priests, through their servant, it was not lost on me that the priests sent their servant. They didn't go do this dirty deed themselves, because why would they want to get their hands dirty? The priest, through their servant, inserted themselves into the offering process in a way that distorted it. Symbolically, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 more figures to this story. The sacrifice, your inner offering, your sincerity, your growth, your self-connection. The servant, the automatic triggers or internalized habits that act on behalf of those harmful patterns. The fork, the intrusive tools these patterns use to disrupt your peace. The verse says, whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, this is your soul trying to offer something good, clarity, healing, self-compassion, connection with God, personal growth, inner alignment. This represents moments you are trying to show up as your true self. The priest servant would come. This is an internal dynamic, an old reflex, a conditioned belief, or an automatic response. Something that comes whenever you try to make progress. The servant represents anxiety that interrupts peace, self-doubt that interrupts confidence, old narratives that interrupt self-worth, intrusive thoughts that interrupt clarity, old coping strategies that interrupt healing. Let me talk about this for a minute. I had a rough week last week, and I am healing as I am going through this. And I have good and bad days, and I have rough days where I just don't know what is going on inside, and I have great days where you can't tell me anything. Last week, I was having some rough days. I did my goodbye tour. Although I was ready for it and I completed it, I think my mind and my heart and my soul, we were processing it. And man, that processing caught up with me, and I was not having a couple of good days. In my past life, what I would do is call up a friend and say, let's go get some drinks. And when I say drinks, I really mean drinks, where it's not going to be 1 or 2, it's going to be 10 or 12. Or I'm going to sit in my apartment with my rum bottle and I'm going to drink until I pass out. Maybe I'm going to take a THC gummy. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to go out and order a bunch of food and just eat myself into a coma. These are all the ways that I used to cope when something wasn't feeling right, when I didn't know how to handle something, when I didn't internally feel good. And this time, I didn't do that. Instead of going out for food, alcohol, or distracting myself with people, things, or shiny objects, I called my massage therapist, who has now become such a dear, dear friend. We refer to her as a wellness warrior. I sent her a message that said, I need some PEMF time. PEMF is pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. Let me tell you, when Amber at Wellness Headquarters introduced her PEMF mat to me, it changed my life. I will say her massages changed my life. She has such healing hands. She's very intuitive. And if you don't do massages when you're healing your trauma, when you're going through your trauma, think about it. It really is a tool that helps kind of move that trauma out of your body as you're trying to move it out of your mind and spirit and soul. When Amber introduced this PEMF mat to me, she said, just try it out. Let's see how it works. It's like grounding on steroids. It's like if the ground, the grass, the dirt was plugged in and lit up, and I stepped on it, and it just went all through my body. It just improved everything. So last week, when I was having a difficult time, an emotional time, when I was moving this trauma throughout my body, out of my mind, out of my heart, instead of reverting back to my old patterns, I sent Amber a message and I said, I need some time with the mat. And she said, okay, show up at this time. I showed up with smoothies instead of booze. I had to giggle. And I looked at her and said, first time in my life going through emotional stuff that I did not show up to a friend's place with booze. Instead, I showed up to get a PEMF treatment with a smoothie. I knew my life was changing. But this PEMF mat, when you sit on it for a little bit, you wear these goggles and you sit on it and you just sit there. And it's like 15, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. It's depending on really what you're going through and what you need. For your body, it helps inflammation. And I had a ankle replacement a little over a year ago. So it benefits that part. It helps my circulation. But I'm talking emotional, mental health. That's what I'm talking about right now. So it improves mood. It reduces anxiety. It helps with emotional regulation. It helps with sleep. And that's exactly what I needed. So instead of going back to old coping mechanisms that interrupted my healing, I picked a new one. And I was so proud of myself. I just felt so much better about the decision. And I was so ecstatic that I had someone in my life, whether a friend or not, because I'm telling you, this person, Amber, she will treat you the same as she treats me because everyone matters. That's why she's a wellness warrior. So the servant is that habitual part of you that acts before your conscious self can intervene. And when I picked to go have a treatment and a smoothie instead, I knew my conscious self was in the forefront and was making decisions for me. In the verse, it says, with a 3-pronged fork in his hand. I had to go look up the fork. In my mind, there's this servant walking up to these worshipers with this pitchfork, because a pitchfork it's three-pronged, right? And they're just stabbing at the meat. I wasn't too far off. It's a handheld three-pronged. It's probably looks like one of those ones that you kind of do gardening with, like maybe you have a little garden and it's a little hand tool and it has the three prongs in it. I still don't know if I would be happy if someone was coming at me with a three-pronged sharp object just to get what they thought they deserved. This fork symbolizes intrusion, specifically intrusion that stabs into the moment, pulls something out, disrupts the process, interferes with what is simmering or developing within you. It's multi-pronged because internal disruption often comes from more than one angle. It comes from emotional pressure, mental pressure, physical or somatic tension, learned behaviors, shame or fear, perfectionism. The fork is anything that reaches in and takes from your inner process prematurely. The verse goes on to say, while the meat was being boiled. Boiling is a slow, patient process. I will tell you firsthand, the one that I'm going to mention first is a fact. It's not something that I'm just guessing on. I'm telling you right now, it is a fact because I have been going through it. Healing takes time. No matter how much you want to rush it, no matter if someone tells you, hey, if you do this, you can heal faster. Untrue. Untrue. You have to go through the entire healing process. No one gets to skip steps. No one. You may think that you're a very important person, a VIP. Healing doesn't have VIPs. Everyone has to go through their steps. Everyone has to acknowledge, work through, understand. That is a part of healing. So there is no shortcut. There is no magic anything that can get you there quicker. You have to sit in the muck to clean it all up. The next one, self-worth, grows through warmth. Intuition develops gradually. Emotions need space to integrate. But the fork interrupts all of that before the process is complete. Examples of this, examples of the fork interrupting, impatience with yourself, feeling rushed internally, not allowing yourself space to grow, self-judgment showing up too early, inner pressure cutting off your progress. In my past, when I would begin something sacred, like a new habit, a healthier mindset, a moment of self-compassion, a deeper awareness, a clearer connection with God, something would happen. An old thought would intrude. A familiar fear would rise. An inner critic would speak. A familiar emotional pattern would stir. That familiar emotional pattern was not a smoothie in therapy. It was alcohol, food, and going out acting like an idiot. A fork would show up to interrupt my process and my progress. But this time, for me, it was different. When I would have those internal disruptions, they felt automatic. I didn't invite it. It just showed up. This verse validates not every internal reaction was me. Some were automatic patterns acting out of old conditioning. In my past, when something interrupted my inner process before it was fully developed, it could have been judging myself before I tried something, doubt appearing before my confidence settled in, fear rising before my excitement stabilizes. Fear rising before my excitement stabilizes was a big one for me because adrenaline that courses through the body when a person is scared is the same feeling. It's the same adrenaline that courses through the body when a person is excited. When your nervous system is healed, your body is better at discerning real fear from excitement. So, mild uncertainty, excitement. Challenge, excitement, and focus. Risk, excitement, and caution. Real danger, a bear is coming after me, that's fear. And your body is able to discern what it is. This is what emotional regulation should look like. Another thing that interrupted my inner process before it was fully developed, shame interrupting a moment of reflection. Saying, yes, these things happened to me, or yes, I did these things. That's reflection. But then saying, yes, I did these things. Oh my God, how could I do these things? I'm a horrible person. What is wrong with me? That shame interrupting that reflection. We have to make mistakes to learn. If we don't make mistakes, how do we learn? Just because someone told us doesn't mean it's accurate. And in my last episode, I said, sometimes we are hurt by other people's mistakes. That's life. Those are things that we have to go through. Not everything can be perfect. But reflection on the things that you have done, that's healthy. But when you carry around shame, and that shame does not allow you to reflect in a way that says, I did that, but these are the lessons that I learned from it. And now I understand why I shouldn't do that. That is what we should be doing, not beating ourselves up because of something we did. Can't change the past, but you can heal for your future. Another thing that interrupted my inner process before it was fully developed, tension building when I was trying to relax. feeling guilty for relaxing, feeling guilty for resting. Eli's son's fork showing up mid-process of the sacrifice, not at the end. It's stopping the worshiping. It's stopping the healing. It's stopping the forward movement and putting it on pause. Another way this resonated with me is recognizing what is mine and what was an old pattern. This verse helped me distinguish my true self, the one that was offering something meaningful from the intrusive patterns that were trying to interfere. This is where my self-worth was growing and maturing. This was me realizing my sacred inner offering deserved protection. When we look at verse 12 and 13 together, we start to see something important about our inner world. Verse 12 reminds us that not every voice inside us is aligned with who we really are. Some of those inner patterns, the old beliefs, the automatic reactions, the self-critical thoughts, they speak loudly, but they do not honor our worth or our soul. They act as if they have authority, but they are not connected to our true self or to God. Verse 13 shows us how those patterns tend to behave. They interrupt. They step into sacred moments of growth. They reach into places where healing is happening. They try to pull something out before it's ready, before it has the time to form, settle, or be offered to the heart. When we bring these two verses together, the message becomes clear. The loudest inner voices are not always the true ones, and the interruptions we feel inside often come from a pattern that was never meant to lead us. Maybe that is the invitation these verses give us today. Not to fight ourselves, not to fear our inner world, but to simply recognize what is truly ours and what is truly not ours. To be able to say, this voice honors me, that one does not. This reaction comes from my old self, not my true self. This pressure is not coming from God or my soul, so it is not welcomed here. Verse 12 helps us to identify the false voices. Verse 13 helps us see their impact. And together, they point us toward a new kind of inner life, a relationship with God, and a relationship with ourself, where the soul is honored, where the inner knowing is protected, and where our worth is treated as sacred. That is a space where we should be learning to live from. And that space is where healing, clarity, and connection really begin. I want you to think today. Ask yourself, how is God inviting you to distinguish between the inner patterns that diminish your value and the deeper voice that calls you toward your true self? Let that question echo in your heart for a little bit. It's in these moments of honest reflection that we begin to reclaim our inner authority and we reconnect with the God who honors our worth. May your inner world grow quiet enough to hear the truth, steady enough to hold it, and brave enough to follow where it leads. Thanks for joining me for Holy Chuckles Podcast, where we remember that God's calling doesn't always make sense, but it's always full of grace. If today's story reminded you that you too are seen, chosen, and loved right where you are, then that's the light shining. So until next time, keep your heart open, your laughter genuine, and your light shining.